What are we doing and why are we doing it? Those are questions that come to mind when I read this passage of the story of Babel. And today we're going to pick up with the third and fourth verse. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. They began saying to each other, "Let's make bricks and harden them with fire." In this region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world." So this is the first time in recorded history, according to our Bible, that this massive structure known as a ziggurat, as you learned on Sunday, is one of my new favorite words. I know what a ziggurat is, I just never knew that's what a ziggurat was. So now I enjoy saying it. It's a very fun word to say. And if you haven't said it, I encourage you to go ahead and say it right now. Ziggurat. Anywho, so this was the first time in recorded history, as our Bible tells us here in the 11th chapter of Genesis, that this massive structure was built, this pyramid-like structure that had terraces on it that reached high into the sky. It was an architectural marvel and something to be quite proud of. I mean, these folks, these Babylonians, came together, continued to be together and to work together, unified for a common goal, and accomplished this amazing feat, this beautiful structure that was quite large. And yet, we have to question their motivations. Why did they do what they were doing? When I read about the Tower of Babel and just how big this ziggurat was, as it's intended to be the focal point of the city, of their civilization, for people to marvel at it, to look at it. And it was intended to be a temple on top of the ziggurat so they could worship God, where they believed God would come down and meet them in this temple at the top. But yet, when I read that, it reminds me of going to a big city. For instance, New York City. I like to go to New York City. Haven't been there since the pandemic, as I'm sure many of you have not. But I like to go to the baseball games. I like to wander around Manhattan. And you see these massive structures, many skyscrapers that represent capitalism and commerce and business and earning wealth and employment and jobs. And just the hub of a lot of commerce that goes on throughout the world begins there in Manhattan. And at that same time, as I'm looking up in awe and majesty at these wonderful buildings, or even over in the Bronx, when I go to the New York Yankees baseball stadium, to go to the Yankee Stadium, and I'm marveling at this beautiful structure, the stadium, and all that it encompasses, and the history. And then meanwhile, when you go a block away from the Bronx, or from Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, or as you're marveling up at these massive skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan, at the same time as you look around at the base of these are people that are struggling, are homeless, addicted to drugs, for whatever reason, neglected or forgotten about. For whatever decisions they made, this is where they found themselves, and those that are just struggling. So it's this juxtaposition of these massive, beautiful accomplishments that we have done as humanity, and at the same time, people struggling to survive. That juxtaposition just creates this bit of a cognitive dissonance for myself, and it just makes me question then why we do what we do. What are we trying to accomplish? And I believe that just comes back to here at this Tower of Babel, that the ziggurat in itself was not a bad thing, nor are the baseball stadiums, Yankee Stadium or the Empire State Building or any of these other massive buildings in Manhattan. But at the same time, why did they build that Tower of Babel? Well, they built it because they wanted to marvel at themselves. It was not centered upon God. It was not to give a monument to God, to be in his awe and majesty, not to give him, God, reverence, but instead a celebration of themselves. And sometimes I think about that in our contemporary context with the examples that I've given you, and are we losing our way from God by too much worship of ourselves, of humanity, whether it be in the sports world or whether it be in the business world? Are we Are we revering the athletes and the institutions and capitalism to a degree where God is taking a back seat and we're erecting these monuments as we think we are doing good, but meanwhile many still struggle to survive, to exist, and many don't know God? That's a thought I want you to ponder for today. Friends, I hope this message finds you and yours well, and may God be with you until we meet again.